The neighbor's light. I've always loved my quiet neighborhood in suburban Ohio. It was a place where everyone greeted each other, kids rode bikes, and I felt safe raising my daughters Lily and Emma. Our cozy two-story house, framed by a white picket fence, was filled with laughter, the clinking of dinner plates, and the gentle rustle of leaves. But lately, something felt off. It started a month ago on a Tuesday night, the sky dark and the stars twinkling like distant eyes. As I tucked Lily and Emma into bed, I first noticed the light. I thought it was just a flickering street lamp, but it was brighter, almost too bright for the night. Looking out the window, I saw it coming from Mr. Thompson's house next door. "Dad, what's that light?" Emma asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "I don't know, sweetie. Probably just a light bulb acting up," I replied, trying to dismiss it. But inside, a knot formed in my stomach. Mr. Thompson was a reclusive man, rarely seen outside except to mow his lawn or pick up groceries. We had exchanged pleasantries a few times, but that was it. Over the following nights, the light continued to shine, illuminating the street like a spotlight, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. I could hear its hum through my window, a low, constant drone that seeped into my dreams. Each night I woke up by the window, peering into the unknown, my heart racing. "Can't you try to sleep, Daddy?" Lily would whisper, her eyes wide with concern. "I'm okay, girls. Just checking on things," I'd say, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. As days passed, I noticed more odd occurrences. The mailman, who usually came at 10 a.m., stopped appearing. I saw him parked in front of Mr. Thompson's house, talking to someone out of sight. I waved, but he nodded briskly and drove off, his face pale and tense. One Saturday morning, while sipping coffee and watching the girls play, I saw Mr. Thompson standing at the edge of his driveway. His expression was blank, almost trance-like. The light flickered through his curtains, pulsating like a warning signal. I stepped outside and waved. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, everything okay?" I called out. He blinked slowly and nodded. "Just busy," he replied, his voice flat. A chill ran through me. For a moment, I thought I saw something move behind him, a shadow flitting past the light, but it vanished before I could grasp it. That night, the hum of the light was louder than ever, a relentless thrum vibrating through my bones. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settling. The girls were asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The next day, I asked around the neighborhood. "Has anyone seen the mailman?" I inquired of Mrs. Carter, who lived down the street. "Oh, he said he had a family emergency," she replied, but there was hesitation in her voice, as if she knew more than she let on. The light continued to shine, casting eerie shadows on my porch. I felt trapped, like a moth drawn to its glow. Despite my hesitation, I found myself peering through the cracks in Mr. Thompson's fence. That night, I made a decision. I would confront him. Gathering my courage, I walked to his door, my heart pounding. I knocked softly, the sound echoing through the quiet night. When he opened the door, the light behind him was blinding. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, I'm worried about you. The light, it's been on for weeks. Are you okay?" He stared at me, his eyes wide and unfocused. "You have to keep it on," he murmured. "It's for their protection." "Whose protection? What do you mean?" The words slipped out before I could stop myself. He leaned closer, his breath heavy with a stale scent. "They won't come if the light is on," he said, his eyes darting past me, as if expecting something from the shadows. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling behind me, a whispered sound that sent chills racing down my spine. I turned, but the street was empty, bathed in light from Mr. Thompson's house. I should go, I stammered, backing away slowly. Take care. As I walked home, my heart pounded, dread pooling in my stomach. The hum of the light seemed to follow me, pulsing with my heartbeat, a reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond the glow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of the light echoing in my mind. I heard the girls whispering in their room, but their giggles felt distant, as if they were in another world. In the early hours, a loud crashing sound jolted me awake. I bolted upright, heart racing, and crept down the hallway. The noise had come from outside. Peeking through the window, my breath caught in my throat. The light was gone. In its place was darkness so thick it felt like it was swallowing the street. I could just make out the silhouette of Mr. Thompson's house, shrouded in shadow. Then I heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a chant, echoing through the night air. Panic gripped me. I wanted to call the police, but something within me screamed to stay quiet. I watched as shadows moved around the house, twisting and writhing. The air grew cold and my skin prickled as if something was staring back at me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Just then, I saw a figure lurch forward, its outline barely visible against the dark, moving with unnatural speed toward my window. I stumbled back, heart racing, and whispers filled the room, invading my mind with terror. And then, silence fell. The shadows receded, and darkness swallowed the street. I stood frozen, heart pounding. A moment later, I heard my daughter's soft laughter from their room, blissfully unaware of the nightmare outside. I wanted to run to them, to protect them, but I was paralyzed with fear. The light was gone, but something had taken its place, something lurking in the darkness, waiting for the next flicker of illumination to emerge. And I knew deep down, it was far from over.
Title: The Neighbor's Shadow. I never thought much of my quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a place where everyone waved hello, but rarely interacted beyond occasional barbecues or holiday gatherings. My routine was simple: work at the library, come home to my small two-bedroom house, make dinner for my husband Ben, and unwind with a book before bed. Life was predictable. One Tuesday evening, after a long day shelving books and helping patrons, I returned home to the smell of fresh paint. Ben was in the living room, touching up the walls. "Just a little spring cleaning," he said, grinning as he dipped the brush into a soft blue paint. "Looks great," I replied, but the smell made my head spin. I cracked a window, letting the cool evening breeze wash over me. As I shuffled to the kitchen for water, I noticed our neighbor, Mr. Caldwell, standing outside his house. He was an older man, often seen tending to his garden or sitting on his porch. That evening, I caught his gaze, and he held it just a beat too long. A chill crept down my spine, but I quickly dismissed it. Perhaps it was just the paint fumes. I muttered about Mr. Caldwell's unsettling presence, but then chuckled, saying, "He's harmless, just an old guy who likes to stare." Weeks passed, and my unease toward Mr. Caldwell grew. It wasn't just the way he watched. Small, strange events began to intrude on my life. I'd find my garden tools moved, and I'd hear faint tapping at my window at night, but when I would investigate, nothing would be there. I convinced myself it was paranoia from too many horror podcasts at work. One Saturday afternoon, while crooning the rose bushes, I wore my favorite sun hat and listened to the distant laughter of children. That's when I saw Mr. Caldwell again, standing at the edge of his yard, just beyond the fence, expressionless. "Hello, Mr. Caldwell," I called, forcing a smile. He didn't respond, just continued to stare. It unnerved me, and I turned away, focusing on my task. Moments later, I noticed a shadow at the corner of my eye. I quickly glanced back, but he was gone. "Everything okay?" Ben's voice broke the tension as he came out with 2 cold drinks. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I replied too quickly, wiping my brow. "Just garden stuff. I tried to shake off the feeling pressing against my chest. The next week, I decided to confront my fears. I baked cookies, the kind that always brought smiles. "Let's take these to Mr. Caldwell," I suggested to Ben. He raised an eyebrow, but ultimately shrugged and agreed. As we walked over, dread washed over me again. Ben knocked on the door, and we waited. Silence. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. Mr. Caldwell stood there, eyes wide, unblinking. I handed him the plate, and he studied it as if it were foreign. "Thank you," he said, his voice gravelly. "You're too kind." "Just a little something to say hello," I replied, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. He took the cookies, but instead of closing the door, he stepped onto the porch, leaning against the railing. "You have a lovely home," he said, his eyes darting around as if inspecting it. "Thanks, we try to keep it nice," I said, glancing at Ben, who looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. "Be careful with the shadows," he murmured, as if it were casual. My heart dropped. They sometimes linger longer than they should. Ben and I exchanged a glance, and I felt the air grow heavier. "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. He leaned closer, and I could smell something sweet and rotten, like old fruit. "You don't know who watches you, do you? Sometimes the darkness sees things we can't." That night, I lay awake, unable to shake Mr. Caldwell's words. The house felt different, the shadows longer, more pronounced. I could have sworn I heard whispers, soft, unrecognizable sounds slithering through the darkness. Days turned into a blur of unease. I noticed faint scratches on the windows, as if something had been clawing to get in. I confronted Ben, but he brushed it off as tree branches scraping against the glass. My heart raced every time I heard a creak or rustle outside. Then one night, I woke to find the bedroom door ajar. A sliver of moonlight spilled into the room, illuminating the darkness, but it felt wrong, like the shadows were reaching for something. I tiptoed to the door and peered out. The hallway was empty, but I could hear a low whisper echoing from downstairs. "Ben?" I called out. No answer. Panic rose as I stepped cautiously down the hall, my heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a suffocating fog. I reached the bottom of the stairs and froze. The living room was dimly lit by the streetlight outside, but it felt alive, the shadows flickering. Then I saw him, Mr. Caldwell, standing in my living room, staring at the walls, his head tilted, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "Get away from my home!" I yelled, trembling. He turned slowly, his eyes dark, devoid of warmth. "Sometimes they come for you," he said softly, a chilling smirk creeping across his face. "And sometimes they stay." Before I could react, he stepped back into the shadows, and suddenly the room felt emptier, as though the very air had been sucked away. I stumbled back, panic gripping me. I rushed to grab my phone, but when I turned around, Mr. Caldwell was gone. I spent the rest of the night awake, my heart racing, waiting for dawn. Ben never returned home. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by whispers slithering through the shadows, reminding me that nothing is ever truly gone, and sometimes they linger. It's been weeks now. The police searched, but found nothing. They didn't take my concern seriously, chalking it up to a missing person, an old man who wandered off. But I know better. I see the shadows at the edge of my garden every night, waiting and watching. And every time the wind rustles the trees just right, I swear I hear him whispering through the leaves. They sometimes linger longer than they should.
Title: The Voice in the Walls. I've always cherished my small two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Denver. It's cozy, with creaky floorboards and walls that seem to sigh when the wind picks up. My husband, Mark, and I moved in right after our wedding 2 years ago.
The neighborhood strikes a perfect balance of friendly neighbors and enough distance to feel private. Life felt ordinary. Sipping coffee on the balcony, the aroma of breakfast wafting through the air, and the soft hum of cars passing by. But a few months ago, something changed. It started subtly. While chopping vegetables in the kitchen, I thought I heard a whisper, a faint rustling sound that made me pause. I turned off the fridge to listen, but nothing. At first, I brushed it off as old pipes or the building settling, yet the whispers grew more persistent. "Did you hear that?" I asked Mark one night, his face illuminated only by the flickering television light. "Hear what?" He looked up from his game, brow furrowed. "You're imagining things again." I laughed it off, but unease settled deeper. My mind wandered to stories of previous tenants who spoke of strange happenings, objects moving, lights flickering. Nothing concrete, just urban legends. Still, they gnawed at me. One evening, after a long shift at the cafe where I worked, I flopped onto the couch, grateful for the quiet. But then it came again, a soft whisper, like someone was calling my name from within the walls. "Jenna." It beckoned. I froze, a chill creeping up my spine. I glanced around, heart pounding, wondering if Mark was playing a prank, but the apartment was empty. "Mark!" I called, my voice trembling. No response. As I sat there, the whisper morphed into a low murmur that ebbed and flowed, like the tide washing over pebbles. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to decipher the words. It was unintelligible, but it felt urgent. "Stop thinking about it," I told myself, shaking my head. "Just the pipes." But the night wore on, and the whispers didn't relent. I eventually found sleep, but it was fitful, laced with dreams of dark figures lurking behind closed doors, shadows stretching and creeping. The following days brought dread. I began to notice other strange occurrences. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found my favorite sweater, neatly folded in the middle of the living room floor. My heart raced. "Jenna, did you move my things?" I asked, confusion in my voice. "No, why would I? You know it's just the building settling, right?" I half-heartedly agreed, but I felt something was wrong. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. One night I recorded them on my phone, hoping to capture whatever was happening. The playback was chilling. My name repeated in a raspy tone, followed by a low rumble, like a voice echoing from an abyss. "Jenna, help me." I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in the walls had purpose. It wasn't just a random haunt, it was trying to reach me. Was it connected to the previous tenants? Had someone been lost in these very walls? I brought it up to Mark, but he dismissed it. "You're letting your imagination run wild. You need to relax." But relaxing was impossible. I didn't want to be alone, yet I found myself isolated more often. The whispers escalated at night, now accompanied by soft thuds, as if something was trying to break free. One night, as I lay trembling under the covers, I felt the bed shift, like someone was sitting at the foot of it. "Mark!" I whispered. Silence. I rolled over to find nothing there. My heart raced as I listened to the whispers, now sounding like a frantic chant, echoing through the walls. The air felt heavier, saturated with dread. Finally, I reached my breaking point. I called my mother one evening, voice shaking. "Mom, I think something's wrong with our apartment." "Sweetheart, it's just an old building. You're overthinking. Come visit." I wanted to escape. That weekend, we visited my parents. The moment I stepped into their home, I felt relief wash over me, the warmth overshadowing the dread from our apartment. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even in my childhood home, I sensed something lurking just beyond my line of sight. At dinner, I caught my mother glancing towards the hallway, her expression serious, eyes narrowed. "Did you hear that?" "What?" I asked, my heart racing again. "It sounds like someone's calling your name." I looked down, fear washing over me. The whispers were everywhere, taunting me. When we returned home, the apartment felt darker, shadows stretching longer. I stepped through the doorway, my heart hammering, and there it was, an unmistakable whisper, clearer than ever. "Jenna, help me." I fell back against the wall, breath hitching. The voice was pleading now, desperate, echoing in my skull. In a frantic rush, I grabbed my phone, dialing Mark. The line rang, but he didn't pick up. I tried again, but silence filled the void. Then the whispers turned into laughter, a chilling sound reverberating through the walls, filling the room with a cacophony of glee, mocking me. I stumbled backwards, shadows closing in, and as my back hit the wall, I felt a cold hand grip my ankle from beneath the floorboards. I screamed, an unending sound swallowed by the laughter. The light flickered, and just before everything went dark, I heard one final whisper, clearer than ever. "Join us." Now, I sit in the dark, clutching this phone, unsure of what's real and what isn't. The whispers have grown louder, and the laughter, it never stops. I don't know how much longer I can endure this. I just want to escape, but I fear. What if I already am part of it?
Title: The Watcher Across the Street. I never thought of myself as superstitious. As a data analyst in a quiet Ohio suburb, I balanced spreadsheets and family time with my wife, Sarah, and our son, Ben. We rolled our eyes at ghost stories, favoring family game nights and Netflix. But everything changed a few weeks ago, and now I question what I believed. It started with the man across the street. We rarely spoke, just the occasional nod. He was unremarkable, middle-aged, scruffy beard, always in a faded green jacket. Yet there was something unsettling about him that made me uneasy whenever I glimpsed him from our living room window. I dismissed it as overactive imagination, fueled by late-night horror movies. One Saturday morning, sipping coffee on the porch while watching Ben play, I glanced at the man's house. He stood on his porch staring directly at us. Sunlight cast strange shadows on his face, making him appear grotesque. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly looked away. "Dad, can I play over there?" Ben asked, pointing to the man's yard. "Not today, buddy. Let's stay in our yard." I smiled, but Ben's disappointment was clear. As days went by, I noticed odd things. The man would sit on his porch for hours, never moving or speaking. One evening I saw him peering through his window, face pressed against the glass. It was unsettling, and I felt a surge of protectiveness over my family. "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you?" I asked Sarah one night, the glow of our living room lamp flickering. "What do you mean?" she replied, looking up from her book. "Just that guy across the street. He's always outside. It's like he's waiting." She lightly laughed. "You're overthinking it. He's probably just lonely." That night, I lay in bed trying to convince myself she was right. Sleep evaded me, and the feeling of being watched weighed heavily on me. I kept hearing faint sounds outside, creaking like footsteps on the man's porch. Things escalated quickly. Ben started acting strangely, withdrawn, often staring blankly or mumbling to himself. I attributed it to childhood imagination. Maybe he was just tired or adjusting to school. But one night, he came to my room clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Dad, can I sleep with you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Of course, buddy. What's wrong?" I sat up, concern flooding me. "I don't know, I just feel weird, like someone's watching me." A knot tightened in my stomach. I tucked him in, trying to reassure him, but his words echoed in my mind. The next evening, I decided to confront the man. My heart raced as I walked across the street. He sat on his porch, a dim lamp illuminating his face. He looked up, eyes wide and unblinking. Hey there," I began, trying to sound casual. "I've noticed you're often outside. Everything okay?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just watching," he replied, voice low.
Watching what? Just watching. I backed away, chills creeping up my spine. His gaze lingered in my mind long after I returned home. That night, I was restless. Every creak seemed amplified. Every whisper of wind felt like a warning. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping. I slipped out of bed, heart racing, and crept toward the living room. At the window, I saw him. The man stood in his yard, staring directly at our house, hand raised, tapping against the fence. I felt bile rise in my throat, paralyzed by fear. Suddenly, he stopped, eyes locking onto mine. I stumbled back, heart pounding, fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, but the call dropped, static buzzing in my ear. Desperate, I turned on all the lights, waking Sarah. "Something's wrong, he's outside." My voice trembled. She blinked, confusion on her face. "Who? What are you talking about?" "The man across the street. He's watching us." When I glanced outside, he was gone, vanished into the shadows. Sarah sighed, clearly annoyed. "You're waking me for this? He's just a neighbor, Mark." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next few days I was on edge, eyes darting to the window at every noise. I avoided looking across the street, but noticed the man hadn't been outside since that night. Ben seemed to perk up. Laughter returned as he played. Yet my unease lingered, convinced something sinister lurked beneath the surface. One evening, the air felt thick and suffocating. Stepping outside for fresh air, I caught Ben standing still at the edge of our yard, staring across the street. "Ben!" I called, but he didn't respond. I hurried over, pulse racing. "What are you doing, buddy?" He turned slowly, a smile creeping across his face that looked almost wrong. "I'm waiting for him, Dad. He said he'd come back." Panic surged. Who? Who are you waiting for?" Before he could answer, a low, rumbling laughter echoed from the shadows. I turned, but saw nothing, just the empty porch. "Inside now," I ordered, gripping Ben's arm as we rushed back and locked the door. The next morning, I found our backyard filled with toys. Ben's action figures, bike, even a stuffed dinosaur, scattered on the grass. Blood drained from my face. "Did you leave these out, Ben?" I asked shakily. "No, Daddy, I thought you did." The shadows crept closer as dawn broke. I'd been so focused on the man across the street that I hadn't considered what might be happening in my own home. That night, I tucked Ben in, dread heavy in my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling our lives teetered on an edge I couldn't understand. In the dead of night, I woke to soft whispering. I strained to listen, heart racing. As the words formed a chilling chant, my name echoed through the darkness. "Mark! Mark!" It came from the window. Daring to peek, I saw him. The man, standing on the sidewalk, eyes glinting in the moonlight. He raised a hand, and fear surged. "Come play," he whispered, the sound slithering into my mind. I stumbled back, fear coursing through me. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but froze when the lights flickered and went dark. Now every shadow feels alive, every whisper a promise of something sinister lurking just beyond my vision. Something is waiting for me to let my guard down. I can hear the laughter now, louder, echoing in the stillness of the night. And one thing is clear, he's not gone, not by a long shot.